Hi, I'm Matt Roberts, health and OCR coach. Welcome to the Obstacle Dominator podcast. We specialize in training new and upcoming OCR athletes to excel in both life and competition. If you're a racer looking to improve your running, enhance your obstacle efficiency, and learn how to fuel your body for peak performance, you've come to the right place. We'll cover everything from building confidence, physical ability, your physique, and owning nutrition and recovery techniques. Join us for our weekly podcast episodes where you'll discover the race strategies and tactics that we teach our successful team members that will also allow you to dominate the obstacles in your path. Afternoon, Mitch.
How's it going?
Yeah, good, man. Welcome back for another podcast. Have another chat.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome, man. So, I think where we're going to take today's podcast is largely around recovery, and really talking about what the most important aspect of that is. So let's dive into talking about sleep, but everything surrounding sleep as well, the routines that actually feed into sleep as well. I think what we'll do is we'll speak from our own experience and what we've seen in our own metrics and markers. So where do you feel like the best place to start is with all of this?
Let's look at routines of sleep to begin with, because that's quite an important factor to set you up for a good night's sleep or to set you up for a shit night's sleep, essentially. So what we do within our routines plays a big role. So if you're up watching TV, you're on your phone, and then you put your phone down or turn the TV off and you go straight to bed, like you're going to struggle getting to sleep because your mind is still processing all of the information that it's absorbed from the screens and technology.
Okay, let's dive into routines then surrounding sleep.
When we sleep, we all have a pattern or a routine that we go through. Subconsciously, we may not know it. We may know it. But what we mean when we talk about routines is the habits and the actions that we're doing leading up to sleep. So if you're watching TV, scrolling through social media, and then you put your phone down and then you hop straight into bed and go to sleep, you're going to have a poor time getting to sleep, one, due to the information that's been absorbed, but then your mind's racing as well. So you're not going to be able to get a decent night's sleep. You've basically affected your sleep due to those actions. Whereas if you've put your phone away, you've done some, I don't know, meditation, stretching, or even having a conversation with a loved one and just coming away from that, that will be more beneficial because you're allowing your mind to wind down from all the stress and strain that technology and digital devices give us. And then you're more than likely going to be able to sleep a lot better as well. Like it's the saying, if you go out on a night out, everyone's been on a night out, you get home, depending how pissed you are, is depending how fast you fall asleep. But normally it can be a struggle and you wake up feeling like crap most of the time. Like, if your routine is set up, you'll have a good night's sleep and you'll wake up feeling primed and energized. If you wake up feeling groggy and a little bit of brain fog, then that is something which you want to look at differently to what you're doing within your routine.
So diving into the routines, a lot of the constructs that we have in our life are determined by the people that are within it, our daily schedule, our own personal habits and routines, and really the way that we have our home or living environment, and also the consistency we have around all of that, whether we're in the same place or not, whether we're traveling, whether we're staying in hotels. Thing to remember is like to ease out of the day and ease into the day is a good way to start that if workable. And this is really going to depend on the individual and their lifestyle. I know some people have shifts that they need to work, whether that's morning or night, or they're needing to commute and get up early. So these are the determining environmental factors within the routine. But then based on that, the habits have been formed around that in a positive and negative way. But I think what Mitch was talking about there is like phone usage. And we do like a completely different like training and topic on like our relationship to our phone or technology, which can be really, really good in some aspects because we live in this digital age where we can like utilize technology, and we're going to go into some of the tech that we actually use. But where it could be detrimental is actually if that's encroaching on like our lifestyle in a detrimental way, and it's actually impacting sleep, and one of which being the phone and that digital stimulation after dark and the blue light that we're subjected to will suppress the function of a hormone known as melatonin, which actually starts the sleep phase, the sleep cycle, before you go to sleep. Essentially, it's like a pressure that's built up across the day, and then melatonin comes in, which actually starts the sleep phases as such. When we're exposed to digital stimulation after dark and blue light, what happens is the melatonin is suppressed. Although the sleep pressure can still build, it can make us fall asleep later than actually we should and would. And imagine now, like examples we've had, whether that's in the military or you're out in nature for long periods of time, depending on the season or whatever else, if we was allowed to naturally being our environment. And what I mean by that is when the sun goes down, would fall asleep soon afterwards, and when the sun rises, would probably wake up around about that time. But we kind of shield ourselves from certain things in the environment, and we also incorporate things into our environment which will knock us out of that natural alignment of that circadian rhythm, which is basically the 24-hour biological clock. So it's being mindful of that. And just going back to the statement I made, like a good one to live by is like ease out of the day and ease into the day. Now, talking about our relationship to our phone as well, this can be problematic because a lot of people can use their phone to ease out of the day. It may be like a coping mechanism, maybe to release stress, maybe because you're watching something. So it's being mindful of actually how you're using the phone, and is that actually a useful, constructive tool if you are wanting to maximize your sleep, to maximize your recovery, to maximize your fitness gains. And even with that aside, like sleep being one of the largest pillars for our overall health, and it's been shown time and time again, if we're getting less than 6 hours sleep, like you are cutting a significant portion of your life off when you do that like religiously. So kind of talking about people that are shift workers, people in the military, people in the health service, all these people that are advocating health and fitness aren't necessarily utilizing one of the greatest tools that we have available to us each and every day. So we'll talk a lot about how we can improve our sleep and maximize different sleep stages so that we can actually recover better, perform better, and ultimately have more energy physically and mentally. Anything else you want to add on that, Mitch, to do with like relationship to phone or environment or habits, routine?
No, I think we've covered the basics of it. Like, there's no need to get too scientific and deep into it. Like, it's just being aware of what your routine looks like, because if you don't have a good routine in place, or even if you do, you still may not get the recovery that you need. And I've got a great example of that.
Great. Also, I know we've worked with quite a lot of people over the past few years. I can remember a percentage of people coming to us wanting to actually improve their sleep, even if that wasn't something that they realized at the time when they started like working with us or before they started working with us, because the way they had slept up until that point had become the norm. And in some cases, maybe only getting 4, 5, 6 hours sleep per night had become the norm. And when we dived into it even deeper with them, they were like, well, this is the way it's always been. Like, as long as I can remember, I've only been able to get that amount of sleep. And then that becomes like the belief system, which is reinforced by the habit of the routine. But actually, like, it's made me like chuckle a little bit when these people have come in, because it's like, okay, like realistically, you should be able to get 7.5 to 9 hours every night. but how much of that is actually not happening because of like the environment that you have, the routine that you have, and also the things that are in that environment that are probably causing sleep disturbances, either knowingly or unknowingly, but a little bit of like, I don't know, ignorance in a way of actually the patterns and habits and routines that are impacting the ability to sleep. And actually, with a few simple changes, these people have been able to get from 5 hours sleep to 7.5 hours sleep within a matter of days, if not weeks, with just a few little shifts. So we can speak about what those are, but from like the top of your head, what are some of the most important things for improving sleep that you see, Mitch?
One, having your last meal around 6 p.m. So eat like giving yourself at least 3-4 hours before you go to bed to allow your body to digest the food. Because if you don't, and say you eat at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then go to bed at 10, you may think you're getting a good night's sleep, but the reality is internally your digestive system is getting to work. It's digesting the food, it's breaking it down. So it's working. So it's actually under a small amount of strain. So your body's not physically fully recovering. Types of supplements as well, magnesium being one. I used to struggle to like wake up or have a good night's sleep. And when I started making these changes and taking magnesium, that was a big improvement. Like I used to need like 8 to 10 alarms to get up. One alarm would go off, I'd turn it off and go back to sleep. Whereas now I have one alarm, it goes off and I'm up straight away. So I'm naturally now in a better position with my sleep. But that's just down to making these changes of eating earlier, taking supplements that can help.
Yeah, agreed. Big one. And something I noticed in myself like years ago was actually when I ate late, my body was still in a state of digestion. And even if I didn't actually like physically notice it at that time, there was certainly some like implications to eating late. And now, because I'm very in tune with my body, if I do happen to eat late, I definitely notice in the morning that there's food still like sitting there that hasn't passed through the body correctly. And that's a really interesting one, because if we think about it, if we're trying to meet the demands of sleep and actually truly like resting and therefore getting into that restful sleep or sleep states or sleep stages, but then also we're asking the body to meet the demands of digesting food. They're completely different things. So you may digest food, but you may not digest it in the way that you should be doing it, because you're asking the body to sleep and vice versa. So yeah, I think certainly not eating too late is a good thing, and almost like what we say for like the performance-based nutrition. If you want your body to utilize the fuel that you've ingested, you need to give it enough time, and that could be 2 hours, that could be 4 hours, anywhere between that. But if you're eating within 2 hours of bed, you could almost certainly like say that there will be some form of this sleep disturbance, even if you don't necessarily feel it. But when we've gone into like looking at the statistics, like using Whoop and Aura and other apps, like there certainly is like sleep disturbances, and then pairing that up with actually how you feel is another part of it. So yeah, try and eat as far away from bed as possible. But with that being said, it's not always like workable. This is going to depend on like what you do for a job, what your lifestyle is like. It might not always be practical, but it's definitely something worth being mindful of. And we could dive more into the nutritional aspect, but in fact, I had a call with one of the guys the other day, and he's like, I'm not managing to like eat enough, even though things are moving in the right way. I kind of identified that, and it was like, okay, well, you can't eat big meals because actually you're incorporating a little bit of fasting, and it's actually not workable for you to eat the massive amounts of food. So adding in another meal or actually eating more at one of those meals can compensate prior to that, so that you don't have to eat food. And something myself and Josie do, because sometimes she'll work like into the evening late, making sure you have the main meal in the early part of the day, and then in the later part of the day eating something smaller, so it's not so hard on the digestive system. I think that's moving away from the conventional approach of we must have breakfast in the morning, we must have lunch, we must have dinner, when actually like breakfast is breaking the fast. And as we know, sometimes breakfast or breaking the fast could be somewhere in the afternoon, and then the next meal could be the main meal of the day. Right, but we're kind of going into the weeds of nutrition a little bit more, but basically what we're saying is like to prevent sleep disturbances and to maximize your sleep, as well as like the ability to absorb the nutrition from your food, you need to eat as far away from bedtime as possible in order to do that. Another thing you mentioned there was like magnesium, like supplementation of magnesium, magnesium being one of the electrolytes. And this actually led on to another point, or leads on to another point that I was going to make in regards to hydration as well, because it's very similar to the nutritional aspect. Whereas if we drink lots of fluid before bed, then potentially that's going to cause a sleep disturbance because you're going to need to wake up in the night to urinate. But it's also important to make sure that you are hydrated, and in particular using like magnesium and other electrolytes, whether that's in supplement form or actually you're adding more like salt to your food, a quality salt to your food, to lock in that hydration to prevent you from having sleep disturbances because of the amount of that you've drunk in the hours before bed. But a lot of us are actually like dehydrated. Like many of us don't actually drink enough, or if we do drink enough water, the quality of the water may not be so good. We're just drinking typical tap water. There's no filtration or any like additional minerals added to it, which can be problematic. But then also we're not consuming the correct amount of electrolytes to then ensure that the hydration is locked into the body. But magnesium is a really, really good one. There's two ways that actually, well, there's numerous ways you can consume magnesium, like orally or like through the skin, are two powerful ways. And actually like talking about recovery and a benefit to add in sleep, like you could have some form of like heat thermogenesis, like take a hot bath and add some magnesium bath salts. Yeah, sitting there for 15-20 minutes, you're absorbing the magnesium through the body, and that can actually help you ease out of the day. And actually the magnesium can help you like sleep as well. But then you could take like a magnesium supplement on top of that. Yeah, some things to consider, making sure that you're not drinking too late, eating too late. And if you are somebody that are getting up in the night for the toilet, maybe you're getting to that particular point of life, you're kind of over 40 and your bladder can't handle it, or simply you're actually consuming too much fluid. I remember coaching a guy called Joe a few years back, and simple shift to him being able to sleep through the night was stop drinking by this time. Otherwise, you're going to get up, and it was like overnight change. I'm able to get a full night's sleep.
One thing that came up there, like going back to disturbances. So drinking too much and obviously eating too much, they're going to cause disturbances throughout the night. But naturally, within our sleep, we can lose 50 minutes to 60 minutes of sleep a night, which we never get back due to natural disturbances, whether that's sound, whether that's light. So naturally, we will lose a bit of sleep. It doesn't affect your sleep to a certain point, but when say we go to bed at 10 and wake up at 6, people think, oh, I've had a solid 8 hours sleep, when in reality you've probably had only 6 hours and 50 minutes to 7 hours of sleep. And it's just due to you subconsciously react, or your body subconsciously reacting to those disturbances throughout the night. So I always plan it in my head, make sure that I'm in bed at least 8.5 hours. So then I know I've had at least 7.5 hours sleep, which will be a lot beneficial for performance and productivity throughout the day. And then if naps are needed, then I'll throw one in some point throughout the day as well. So our bodies will always be disturbed at night, whether you're sleeping next to a partner, you got pets, hearing cars driving past outside, light coming in through the curtains. Like there's all of these things that can disturb us. So it's important to make sure that we reduce the disturbances as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point. It's talking about like having a like a hygienic sleep environment. I'm not just talking about like having a clean room. It's like in that environment to enable us to like effectively go through the different phases of sleep, like within the sleep cycles. And you mentioned there, like aiming to get like around about 8.5 hours or so. That's something we want to aim for. And that kind of leads into like easing out of the day. What time are we like aiming to be into bed? What time are we aiming to be asleep by? How much sleep are we going to get based on that and the time that we've set an alarm clock for? So it's like almost reverse engineering the process. Like how much sleep do we actually need to be getting? Yeah, how much do we want to achieve? And then also looking at the breakdown of each of those, because there's three things that come hand in hand. It's like, well, we look at the consistency of sleep. And what we mean by that is the time that you go to bed and fall asleep each night. And then also looking at like the time that you wake up. So the sleep wake cycle. And then once we get the consistency, that will tell us the duration that we get. And also based on that, or those two other factors, the consistency and the duration, that will equate to the quality, because we need to have like this habit, this routine, the same or as close to the same as possible each and every night, to make sure that we are maxing out on the sleep cycles and the benefits of that. And each sleep cycle can be approximately like 90 minutes going through the different phases of sleep. But when we look at that, okay, if we're having disturbances within those sleep cycles or those different phases of sleep, that can knock us out of that sleep cycle. And going back into the disturbances, sometimes like even when I look at my stats and it's like, yeah, you was awake from here to here, it's like I don't even remember that. So you're doing it unconsciously, which is really, really fascinating. But then you'll go back to sleep. So really looking at consistency, duration, and quality, and then that will give us the blocks of the 90 minutes that we need. And if you like round it up, you're either looking to get like 7.5 hours sleep bottom end, which would be 5 sleep cycles, or top end, you're looking to get like 9 hours sleep, which I know is not workable for most. If you're getting less than 7.5 hours and you're more towards 6, not only you like cutting a big benefit off of your recovery, you're also like having a significant impact on your health as well. So like shooting for 7.5 hours should say, well, I need to be waking up at this time, which means I need to be falling asleep at this time, which means it takes me this long to get to sleep. So I need to make sure I'm in bed at this time. Okay. And this is going to be very individual based, but that's something to definitely shoot for.
We can like look at this through like the data when we go through it, because like looking at like the last month of data that I had back in 2023, when you lose like, so when you're not getting enough sleep, your body is going to need more sleep to recover. Like it's not a case of, right, I've had 5 hours sleep, right, I can keep surviving off 5 hours sleep, because eventually your body will get to a point where it is physically and mentally drained. And to give an example, one of the days I had hit 5 hours sleep. So it was saying I needed 10.5 hours sleep for my body to recover, which is a huge amount. Now, most people struggle to get 7.5 hours sleep. So if you're not getting enough sleep already, but then you're training hard, your body is just not recovering. So if you're then struggling to get fitness gains or performance gains, it's because you've got an imbalance of, or an inconsistency of waking up and or going to bed and wake up times. And like it's a big factor for your recovery.
Yeah, yeah. The demands of the day determine how much sleep actually you need, and that can change on a daily basis. It's a really, really important fact for those people that train really hard but also work really hard and have very lengthy days. So yeah, out of everything we've said so far, I think it's just being mindful of like doing the very best that you can. And that might be looking at actually like the time that you wake up and the time therefore you can realistically go to bed, taking into consideration that you've got like hopefully some time to like rest and digest food in the evening time. You've got the ability to block digital stimulation after dark, so you're not like overstimulating yourself with blue light or watching something, or like just really ramping up your nervous system when actually you should be like aiming to ease out of the day. So some really, really big considerations there that actually make a really, really big impact. So, I mean, we can dive more into the routine, but I think like that's the construct for actually making sure that you've got the consistency, which feeds into the time, the duration, but then also the quality of sleep, which is massively important, which I think we should dive into a little bit more, but we'll come back to this because I still want to look at like the environmental factors before we dive into like the sleep stages, as such, like the light sleep, deep sleep, rapid eye movement, which is like that dream state sleep, and also the wakefulness. And we can look at our whoop in a little bit more detail. What else would you say would enhance people's sleep?
Having like a cooler room is something that can be quite beneficial. Obviously, you are going to have the potential disturbance of sound and light coming through. However, if you're in a hot room, and it was quite interesting. My partner the other day, her recovery wasn't the greatest, and her body temperature, I think it was like had plus by like 0.2 degrees, and she wore her jumper and her trackies in bed because she was cold. So that change in temperature, and because the window wasn't open as well, her body was basically heated, so she wasn't balancing out her core temperature within her sleep. So that then affected recovery. So you want to make sure that you have got, I say, room temperature, or like at least somewhere where it can be a bit cool. Like in the summer, a lot of people use fans for white noise and to cool them down. Like that is a good thing because it's going to help regulate your body's temperature. Like if you're constantly warm and you're sweating, that's just going to cause a lot of disturbances, and then you're not going to get that good quality sleep that you
Mm,
need.
yeah, yeah.
And carry on.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to know. Yeah, temperature. I find that females typically want to be like warmer, more cozy in the evening. And men typically like to have like a cooler environment with a bit of airflow. So that can be a difficult one to navigate if you're in a male-female dynamic relationship, because one person wants the comfort and the heat, and then the other person wants like the cooler aspect of it as well. And something interesting actually I noticed was like my skin temperature was elevated on a couple of occasions due to sleeping in the same bed as Josie. And that was really interesting. And that wasn't like because it was probably because the tracker was in that area or whatever. But it's really, really interesting to see how the temperature and how cool we are or how hot we are will really determine it. I think thinking back to like when I've been colder, I feel like I sleep better. And maybe that's because of the fresh air, but maybe it is because of like the temperature as well, and like the ability to like regulate my system.
Yeah. Like if it is a conversation you've got to have with your partner, just do the body system. They can be in the nice warm cozy clothes. You're naked or in your boxers, and you're their human radiator. Like because you will naturally when humans are close together, your body heat will naturally rub off against each other. So it will naturally keep them warm. So if they
Mhm.
say they're cold, I guarantee they'll warm up within 10-15 minutes just due to the body temperature. So body system.
Yeah. And also layers as well, like skin to skin is definitely better for creating warmth rather than having tons and tons of layers on, or at least having like thinner layers that are built out on if absolutely necessary. But I don't feel like it's necessary. And then also like clothing, and depending on what type of clothing we're actually wearing, can actually cause sleep disturbances as well. So that's definitely another one to consider. But yeah, I think temperature is huge and often can be quite overlooked. Um, so yeah, take that into consideration at the later part of the year. I think other one is the use of light. We've talked about blue light and digital stimulation after dark, whether that's through like technology or lights on in the house, and also looking at the evening time and also looking at the morning time. The light is very different. So in the morning, we want to get as much light as possible to wake the body up. And then in the later part of the day, we want to start minimizing the light. So it's actually looking at like the night and day as such. And if we're not getting as bizarre as this sounds, enough light in the morning, that can have implications on us actually being able to ease out of the day, much like if we're exposed to blue light and digital stimulation after dark and not actually like the ambient light or the sunset, then that can cause sleep disturbances as well, because we're telling the body to wake up through artificial light when actually we should be watching the sun go down to allow us to ease out of the day. And there's huge benefits to both of those as well. I know it's not always workable, but it could be a good thing to practice, like get outside around sunset, go for an evening walk, ease out of the day, watch the sun go down, and then wear like blue light blocker glasses, or at least like shield yourself in some way, shape, or form when you come back into the house, or using like candlelight or something along those lines can really prevent sleep disturbances. Yeah, and then a really, really powerful thing, and actually suggested this to a few people over the years. And it's really fascinating looking at their work schedule, especially at this time of the year where we can often be up before the sun's up. Then we can be exposing ourselves to all this like artificial light. Then we can be in a car traveling to work, arriving at work, and then being inside a building all day. And then all we're exposed to is artificial light, and we're not actually getting like the light from the sunshine or sunlight. And even when it's a cloudy day, the sunlight is very, very potent, very powerful. And something I remember this particular individual was doing was like getting up before the sun, traveling to work, and then going in a building, being in a building all day, and then coming home when it's dark. So never really actually getting any like sunlight or sun exposure, which, talking about that alone and vitamin D, like essential for bone health, like overall health, immune function, the list is endless. But a simple shift was actually like when you're getting up, go outside, look up at the sky. Or if you can't do that on the way to work, like get outside during the day and look up at the sky for a period of time. Actually get outside rather than looking for a window where often that can be like filtered. And actually that was something else that was really pivotal for this individual sleep at night, was actually getting more direct sunlight in the early part of the day and across the day. So use of light, you want to get it in the morning and you want to minimize artificial light in the evening. All right. We often use blue light blockers. You can use filters on phones, laptops, which are really useful tools at the same time. Another thing, noises, we've mentioned that, like if there's noises in the environment, that can obviously like disturb you and wake you up. And often that can come if you're like traveling, racing, whatever, in different environments. Like being in a hotel room or an alien environment can make you have sleep disturbances on its own, and that's because it's an unfamiliar environment, and our like reptilian brain is kind of a little bit on standby because it's in an unfamiliar environment. And all the things that we've just mentioned can be contained within that as well. One last thing on light as well, like dark room. Yeah, like if you want to maximize your sleep, maybe early morning you want to make sure that the sunlight's not coming through the curtains or the blinds or whatever else. But remember, like, you can utilize the sunlight to wake you up. But if you really want to maximize like the duration and therefore the quality and the consistency, really looking at how you can shield yourself from the sun, but also artificial light to elongate the benefits of the sleep to maximize it. So like Mitch was saying, like if you know that you need to be getting 10 hours of sleep or 9 hours of sleep or 7.5 hours of sleep, but you're not getting anywhere near that because of the time you finish work and the time you have to get up, really look into like how you can like make the room dark, minimize disturbances, and ensure that you get a good night's sleep.
Like even if you do these things, you may still not get the best quality of sleep for whatever reason, and that could be down to you're out of sync with your circadian rhythm as well. And to give an example of this, Saturday I went to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, latest I'd been up in a long time. Now I was in bed for 9 hours, so I had 8 hours sleep. However, I woke up, like the sun was already out. I woke up feeling groggy. I woke up feeling tired. My mood, for some reason, like I was angry, I was annoyed. And it was down to, I hadn't stuck to the time that I went to bed, and I'd gotten up later. So even though I've had a good amount of sleep, like my mood was affected the productivity, how I was thinking. So my cognitive function was affected as well. Bearing in mind, I'd worn my blue light blockers on the evening. I was in a dark room. Like I had eaten at 7 o'clock. So there was no disturbance with food. But because the consistency wasn't there on that day, it then threw a whole spanner in the works throughout the day. So when I got back last night, I was knackered. Like I was absolutely shattered from traveling and social interaction. And it was just more down to the fact that I weren't consistent. So it's important that when you're going to sleep, and so no, we spoke about like waking up at the same time, going to bed at the same time. Don't just do it a Monday to Friday, right? I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want on a weekend, because it's then just going to throw you off completely. You want to aim to be as consistent as you can. It's not always going to be perfect. You're going to have times where you're at family events, or you've gone out with the missus, or you're spending time with the kids. You let them stay up a bit later. But if you can be consistent, you're going to gain a lot more benefits from it than just throwing it completely out the window.
Yeah, I think that speaks not only to like the sleep and the benefits that bleed over into the other aspects of life, but it does actually speak about those other aspects of life. It's like the consistency. Like I personally find like the more routine I have, like doing the same thing day in, day out, the better I feel because of that consistency. Whereas some people like a lot more variety, but then I feel like if there's too much variety and too much change, it's actually hard to like stick with habits and have like a set routine, because we're all over the place. And sleep is one where you want to have the most consistency around. Yeah, it just really is, because if you don't get correct sleep, like Mitch was saying, like missing out on a few hours extra sleep, you felt that the whole following day. And I took some notes there, and it's like it not only has an impact on like your overall energy, but your productivity. Biologically, it's going to affect like your appetite, so your levels of hunger, your ability to like handle stress as well throughout the day. Like whenever I feel like I've got like a lazy or a lousy night's sleep, the following day, like my appetite will be increased. Like I will actually crave food like earlier than I normally do, and in particular wanting to have sugary food. So not only is like the lack of sleep or missing a few hours of sleep detrimental for the health, it can sabotage fat loss gains, muscle gains, fitness gains. Yeah, so if you are somebody that's looking to like, well, maximize your health, immune function to prevent like illness, disease, but also make sure that you've got the correct energy physically and mentally to take on the day and the stresses that we encounter, but also like losing fat, building muscle, adapting from the stresses of the day, and like training sessions as well. It's really, really important to be like mindful of what Mitch mentioned about having the consistency day in, day out, week in, week out, as best you can. Like it's never really going to be perfect, but sometimes this can be problematic where people like get by during the week and they're getting subpar sleep week in, week out for many, many years in some cases. But then what they try and do is they compensate for that on the weekend. And in a way, you can kind of catch up on sleep, but in another way, you actually can't catch up on lost sleep. Like the way it works in particular, like your deep sleep, if you miss deep sleep, you never get that back. You can sleep in longer, but you're not necessarily going to get that night's sleep back, and the recovery and the gains that could be made from that by sleeping in an extra hour or two on the weekend. It just doesn't work like that. If anything, that feeds back into the consistency, the duration, and the quality. It throws all of those things out of whack. So just be mindful of that one. I think we'll go into the sleep stages in a second. There was a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about, like environmentally. And I'm talking first about like our internal environment and making sure that that's optimized, but then also what we can do within our living environment to make sure that we're doing this effectively. And this one in particular is like breathing. And this is something we're massive on. I know you're doing a lot of work in regards to breath works and seeing a lot of development, in particular doing the reassessment that we just did, which is incredible, fascinating from a performance standpoint. But actually looking at this from a health standpoint, and I mentioned this before, if we look at like the energy systems and what we have in our environment, we can survive for 2 minutes potentially without oxygen. So we don't breathe correctly or suffocate in some way. 2 minutes. Yeah. Looking at water. Yeah. So hydration, fluids can be 2 days. Yeah. Looking at sleep, 2 weeks. If we don't have sleep for 2 weeks, we'll die. Yeah. Maybe even sooner than that. Food, I know it could be 2 weeks, but yeah, knowing what we know, if you're metabolically flexible, you could survive for a couple of months without food, potentially. And actually, the guy who has got like the world record for not consuming any food, only minerals, was over a year. So you can survive for a considerable amount of time without food. And then yeah, I think that's about it in terms of energy systems. But that highlights the importance of like breathing correctly. And this can actually be something that contributes to many sleep disturbances, is having something called apnea or sleep apnea. And we've definitely encountered a few people that have like had like signs and symptoms of this or had this, and through actually optimizing their breathing, the quality of their sleep improves, which makes total sense. Yeah, like the nose is for breathing, the mouth is for eating. But typically what human beings do is they mouth breathe, and this can mess with our like energy systems, our metabolism significantly. Okay, so what we're talking about here is actually ensuring that you are nasal breathing, or if you're not, and signs and symptoms to be aware of that is sign you're waking up with a dry mouth. Yeah, you're thirsty. Yeah. And then on top of that, you're waking up dehydrated, or you're having numerous sleep disturbances, or you're waking yourself up because you stop breathing. Okay. So retraining the body to breathe correctly through the nose will allow you to sleep more efficiently. A couple of things that you can use in terms of tools. One is a nasal dilator to open up the nostrils to make it a little bit easy. I've broken my nose numerous times, and it can be quite hard sometimes to breathe through my nose, although I've retrained it to very effectively. And then also like taping the mouth, or at least placing something on the lips to just hold the mouth shut. And we're not talking about like suffocating you. So if you actually needed to open your mouth, you could, just enough there as like a physical cue just to kind of keep that shut. And the way I trained it into myself, because I've not nasal breathed for most part of my life up until probably only about 4 or 5 years ago, was consciously nasal breathing during the day and at rest, then incorporating that into training. And then at nighttime, we're breathing a significant portion of the time. But if we're breathing incorrectly, that can actually undo all the benefits we're looking to gain from it in the day. I simply just laid there at night, consciously was breathing through my nose, nice deep controlled breaths. And then if I woke up in the night and I found myself mouth breathing, dry mouth, then I would just lay back down, position myself, and go back to consciously nasal breathing. Within a couple of weeks, I noticed significant change. Within 3 months, I trained it back into my body to breathe through my nose at night. I did use tape initially, but I just found that it kept falling off. So you just place it back on until that's trained into your body till you just remove that entirely. You can also use nasal dilators as well as the mouth tape, which are really, really good things. All right. So optimizing breathing is a huge component of actually like getting deep, restful, nourishing sleep.
Yeah, if you're constantly mouth breathing, it will get to the point where like we can overeat, we can overbreathe, so we're getting too much air into the lungs, essentially. So with nasal breathing, it's weird to begin with. It is a weird feeling, and it can feel like even at a restless state like now, it may not feel normal because your body has installed this habit of just breathing in and out through the mouth. So it will take time to adjust. But once you start adjusting and you just keep breathing in and out through the nose, you'll start to notice your breathing gets a lot better and you feel more energized and more recovered as well over the long term. But it takes time. Like you can't expect, it's just like with fitness gains, you can't expect changes to happen within a week, 12 weeks. We've been doing this 3 to 5 years, and there's still a lot more to come, like a lot more of growth to come with this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fundamental, the breathing, like we just said about like how long we can actually last without air, and then actually making sure that we're breathing correctly at the right rate, and not over breathing. And as an example, like talking about health, but also like longevity, the naked mole rat is a being that lives underground for the majority of its life, but does extended breath holds. And actually, it's got like one of the longest lifespans, because it doesn't breathe that often, which is huge. And often we can be over breathing and incorrectly breathing as well, and that can be detrimental to our health, our immune system, our metabolism, and the overall function there. So actually optimizing the breathing, slowing down the breathing, making sure that we are nasal breathing is not only a fundamental habit for health, but it's actually going to feed into like the quality of sleep as well. And if we think about this now, if you think about the animal kingdom, it's only really dogs that will like appear to be breathing through the mouth, but actually that's temperature regulation. Any other animal, if you see it mouth breathing, you would know that that animal is sick, because they will nasal breathe. But when you look at humans and have a look around in your environment as a little bit of a test when you're in town, have a look at how many people are breathing through their mouth, even simply walking or at rest. That would be a sign or a symptom of like poor quality breathing, over breathing, and immune function and overall, like, which we can improve through optimizing the breathing and nasal breathing. Cool. Anything on that front before we break that down?
No.
Yeah. I think just one last thing would be looking at like grounding and earthing as well, and incorporating like a sheet or a mat on the bed, to make sure that like you are helping with recovery. So much like the breathing, it's like you may spend anywhere from 7.5 to 9 hours at night nasal breathing, optimally breathing. That's a significant chunk of the day on top of wakefulness, restfulness, and then a snippet of that is the training. Like looking at earthing, if you're not earthing at night, then actually you're missing out on a significant chunk of like grounding the body, reducing inflammation, accelerating recovery at the same time. So that'll be something else I'll suggest for people if they're not already doing so, like get in contact with the earth as much as possible, and that'll help you optimize your sleep. Cool. Do you want to bring up Whoop? I'll bring up mine, and then we'll do some comparisons and do a little bit of conversation around actually going down into the sleep stages and having a look at trends of what we've seen in ourselves.
Yeah, sure thing. So this was the latest one back in 2023. I don't use Whoop anymore at the moment. I've used it quite enough to understand my body and also what I was doing wrong and what I needed to change up. Now, this is quite a good month to compare to inconsistency of sleep and the effects that it can have when you're not getting enough sleep as well. For those that haven't used Whoop before, it's a tracker which is mainly for your health, performance, and sleep, and also your body's recovery. It's a great tool to use. You can also use the Aura Ring as well, which is very similar. And there's tremendous benefits because you can recognize patterns within your body, within your sleep, and so on. Now, looking here, a lot of the time within this month, I weren't getting enough sleep. Like I wasn't sleeping enough. Like the lowest was, what's that, 4.5 hours. So the night I had 4.5 hours sleep. So it was Sunday the 21st. I had under an hours of deep sleep. Okay, so deep sleep is the main sleep stage where your fitness gains are made. That is where the recovery process happens. And I was nowhere near the minimum amount. And it's the same with REM sleep, your rapid eye movement sleep as well. There wasn't enough there. At that point, the day after, I was needing over 10 hours of sleep for my body to be physically recharged. Now, there were days where I was hitting 7 hours sleep, but as you can see, there was a lot of inconsistency. So I was going to bed late, or I was going to bed early. I wasn't waking up at the same time. And that just led to myself missing sleep cycles. And what happened because of this was essentially, as we can see here, my recovery was not the best at all. Like, I'd had some good days, but then a lot of bad days as well, whether I was in red, whether I was in yellow, like I wasn't recovered. But then what was also happening within training, I know we're not talking about training, but a lot of the time I was in a restorative stage as well of training. So I weren't optimal, I wasn't overreaching. I was in a restorative state before then overreaching. So the training that I was doing is effective. However, because my sleep consistency, wake up and bedtimes wasn't effective, because there were probably times I wasn't eating as well as I could have been, I weren't maximizing the training. I weren't able to take on as much strain. So there was a lot of key areas that were going wrong in this part of the month. And it just goes to show, when you have a lot of things going on in life, you can be either think you're performing to a good standard by doing a lot of training, or not doing enough, but then not getting enough sleep as well. Like, when you're not sleeping enough, just, I'd say, is the biggest part for you to perform and for you to really maximize your gains. You can do all the training, you can do little training, but if you're not sleeping enough and you're not consistent, the effects that it can have is just like, they outweigh so much.
Yeah, some really, really good points here. And like we mentioned at the start of this as well, like, if you're not maximizing this, like, you're not maxing out with your health, because of the knock-on effects of getting inadequate sleep, like, just like throwing your overall energy out of whack, mentally, physically, your appetite, it just has such a knock-on effect if you're not sleeping. And then that's going to affect your productivity and your output, and therefore how much you can actually put into things, and one of which being training. And it's not so much of a problem on the odd occasion, but like, I certainly notice it, like Mitch does. Like, if you get a poor night's sleep, I really feel the brunt of it. So if you're somebody that's like constantly doing that, then that's going to be bad. And even if you're not necessarily feeling the signs because you've been doing it so long, and actually that's become your new normal as such. But if you're somebody that's serious about like being healthy, and even more so like performing, like, sleep is the consolidation from the day. It is the adaptation from the stresses from the day. It is the thing that enhances our fitness over time, because we consolidate from the training. So yeah, don't overlook it on that front. What I'm going to do is I'll go into the sleep stages, and I'll go over some recent night's sleep, actually. So I'll go back to this weekend, and then also I'll look at a night where I went to bed a little bit later. So I'll give you like some good examples and what's contained within that. And this, just remember, this is based on me. It may look very different for you as an individual, but then also I'll give you bad examples, or an example of when I haven't optimized my sleep, and then what actually was happening there, and how I felt. So there's the 4 stages. There's 3 in particular, but I'll start from the top. So the first one is like wakefulness. And contained within this, you may have like something called latency, which is actually like the amount of time that you spend in bed at either end. Okay, so when I go into bed, I'm not actually asleep. Yeah, it will take me a period of time to actually fall asleep. And in this instance, like, I had like about 7 minutes of latency before actually falling asleep, which is typically pretty good. And that is kind of how long it takes me to fall asleep. But then when we go into like the wakefulness, you can see in the early part of the night, which is highlighted in red, there's different periods of like restlessness and wakefulness. And actually looking at the time So I spent approximately, or pretty accurately, like an hour and 35 minutes awake. Now, I don't recall that. I don't remember sitting there twiddling my thumbs going, oh, I can't get back to sleep. Although that could be the case for some of you. But it's just important to highlight that wakefulness is a part of like sleep, whether you consciously know it or subconsciously know it. If you consciously know it, maybe you've got stressors that you've taken into the bedroom with you. You've got things on your mind. You've got like work commitments, jobs, things that you've not put to bed, essentially, that will be causing these sleep disturbances, or anything else we've mentioned with like nutrition, eating too late, hydration, temperature, is it dark, are there noises, these sorts of things will feed into the wakefulness aspect. The next part is your light sleep. Okay, so you can see that this is made up the main bulk of my sleep, all highlighted in the areas of red. Now, light sleep is like mentally restorative as well as physically restorative. So aspects of both, and really, really important of sleep cycle. Okay, and it is going to be the biggest part of your sleep. So technically in this period of sleep, you could wake up quite easily. So just be mindful of that one. And then REM is your rapid eye movement sleep. So if you ever look at someone when there's asleep and their eyes are flickering, that means that they're in this rapid eye movement stage, which makes up about a third of the sleep that you should be getting. As you can see here, like in the red, and the time I was actually asleep, 2 hours and 10 minutes of actual dream sleep. So REM sleep is dream sleep. So this is like mentally restorative sleep. So we want to make sure that we're getting it. Here's another interesting thing as well. If you're not having dreams, like look at the routine. Yeah, look at the environment, because we should be dreaming. Like we just should be dreaming. Okay, so you want to make sure you're getting a decent amount of REM. And then the slow wave sleep, which is also known as deep sleep, is also another big portion. And this is the aspect of physical restorative sleep. So if you're not getting deep sleep and you're someone that's serious about your fitness, then you want to make sure that you're getting a decent amount of deep sleep here. And I'm going to mention a couple of things on the deep sleep, because this is something really, really important to know. And this feeds into what we were saying about not being able to get sleep back if you miss it. Although we think we can by sleeping in on another day or the weekend to try and compensate, it really doesn't work that way. So let's look at the deep sleep. As you can see here, like in the early part of the night, so on this left-hand side here, you've got these gray boxes, which is now red when I highlight it. So if I go to bed by, it looks like I was asleep by maybe 9:50, okay, and then I started to get into my deep sleep shortly after that. So I've actually got a really big chunk of deep sleep here in the early part of the night. So between like 9:45 and 10:30. Okay, so this is really, really important to know, because when we look at another night as an example, so this is the day earlier, going to bed at around about sort of 10:40-ish, yeah, and then also getting my deep sleep all the way up till like 11:30, and then I look at this night of sleep. I've actually lost out on 10% of sleep, and we look at the other days on deep sleep. On this particular night, in comparison, I've got 1 hour and 6 minutes worth of deep sleep. On the following nights, I've got near 2 to 2.5 hours. Yeah, 2.5 hours on the two following nights. So I've got like a time and a half extras worth of deep sleep. And here's the reason why. On this particular night, being a Friday night, I went to bed later. So actually, like, I'm in bed or falling asleep at 11:30 versus being in bed at 9:45. And as you can see here, when I highlight the deep sleep, yeah, there's no red over on the left-hand side of the chart, which means I've missed it. So on this particular night, I've not actually got the benefits of the deep sleep that's actually physically restorative. And actually, this day in particular was a rest day. It was a day. You can see this is the impact of it. It's like, well, I'm not training today, so I'll stay up a little bit later and do different things. Yeah, and missed out on a big chunk of deep sleep, which is physically restorative. And then also, although I've got a good duration total, I've not got a good duration of deep sleep there. and only 90% of my sleep need. So missing out on basically an hour's worth because I stayed up a little bit later. Okay. And then comparing that yet again back to the other night's sleep in the following 2 nights, getting 8 hours and 40 sleep the day afterwards and 2.5 hours of physically restorative deep sleep, all because I went to bed at a reasonable time. And then on the following one, getting 9 hours and 8 minutes, 100% sleep need, and basically 2 hours 20 deep sleep because I went to bed at a decent time. Another thing to realize with deep sleep as well is not only is it prevalent and the most important stuff is in the early part of the night, and if we miss that, we don't get it back. You don't recover it like in the morning. So if you like lay in, you don't get it there. Like that is the way the body works with sleep. If you miss that deep sleep cycle in the early part of the night, you don't then have that when you do fall asleep. Okay, so from what I found, I need to go to bed before 10 p.m. in order to get that. So this is something, if you don't know, you should find out to make sure that you center your sleep wake times around this to maximize the amount of deep sleep and therefore physically restorative sleep you get. Because as you can see, it dwindles across the night going into the morning, with the smallest portion of the deep sleep being around about 6 a.m. So that's another consideration. If you're somebody that's going to bed late and rising early, you're not getting the sleep duration, you're therefore not getting the sleep quality either, even if you've got the consistency behind it. But remember, the consistency leads to the duration, or the duration leads to consistency, and with both of those, that equates to the quality. So remembering to shoot for a minimum of 7.5 hours, also taking into consideration out of that 7.5 hours, you may have an hour and 35 minutes, like I did on this particular night, of wakefulness, which would actually only give you 6 hours sleep as it is. All right, so whatever time you go to bed, if it's 10 p.m. and you wake up at 6, I would argue that you would lose about an hour's worth of sleep. So you're not actually getting the 8 hours of sleep that you think you get in. You probably lost an hour. All right, so this is the benefit of having like a decent tracker like Whoop or Aura. Unfortunately, Garmin, Apple Health Watch, they don't give you the stats and the data that you should, even though they say that you do get that. All right, so look a little bit deeper. I always like recommend that you get Whoop for at least like a 4 to 6 month period to anyone. Like we got like links and discounts, not to sell that to you, but it's a great tool. And then like Mitch has done, Mitch has used it for years and now moved away from it because he knows he's got the consistency, he's got the duration, he's very intuitive and very in tune with his body to know how he feels, and if something is out of whack, how to work on it. Anything to add on the sleep stages, Mitch?
Yeah, one thing that was like quite interesting looking at your sleep as well, like everyone's sleep cycles will be similar. So they do end up, deep sleep is normally near enough, like begins near enough between 10 and half 10 for most people. It then goes into light, and then I believe REM sleep. So REM's more towards the end, like the end. So I believe it's between 2 and 4 o'clock where REM sleep happens.
Yeah.
So your heart rate, depending on your body's recovery as well, your resting heart rate was higher. I believe from looking at it, was higher on the day where you didn't get the best sleep, where you didn't have enough deep sleep. I'm sure
Yeah,
it was like higher 50s to 60s, whereas normally yours is down like 53.
Yeah, let's have a look at this. And even respiratory rate as well is affected. So yeah, so if we're looking up here, yeah, BPM higher. Yeah. And even like if we look at so the day after not getting that good sleep, recovery is down for one, even though we've got 100% sleep performance. But then if we have a look at the actual day itself, so where's this 1 day, week, 49, 48. Yeah. So I mean that's a week. So yeah, I mean HRV's down. But yeah, definitely heart rate is affected due to the poor recovery. Yeah, not by much there, but yeah, certainly like there's going to be more stress on the body, therefore the heart rate's going to be higher to help combat that as well, and especially during the night as well. So the strain, so how much load stress that we take on the day, big amount. But then also that will have an impact on the HRV, so the heart rate variability, which is basically the timing between each heartbeat. and therefore how well primed we are to take on strain during the day, and how like recovered our central nervous system is actually recovered as well on top of that. So yeah, it was a good observation.
I know it's off topic there, but like looking at the information Whoops gave you as well, like even though you've spent 8 minutes higher at 90 to 100%, like it's going to develop fast twitch muscle and burns calories quickly, but you require more rest. So then looking at the training aspect, if you're constantly training at a high intensity, like yes, we need it depending on the event you're preparing for. But if you're doing a high intensity on a daily basis and you're not getting a good sleep, you're not eating good quality food, your body's not recovering, like you're not going to gain those benefits, and it's going to take longer for your body to recover. And that's exactly what happened to myself when we shown the data. Like we was working hard, but just wasn't getting the recovery in because there was a lot of inconsistency there. So it's important to make sure that you are prioritizing your sleep. Like take naps if you need to. Like I will take, if I'm tired, I'll take a nap and I'll wake up feeling refreshed, more energized, and I'll be more productive as well. Whereas if you just try to get through the day because you're tired, your productivity level will just drop massively, and then everything agitates you as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's something else to speak to as well is napping, because human beings, like based on like the science and all the research behind it, and also looking at human evolution, is we are like biphasic sleepers, basically meaning we're not meant to just sleep at an isolated part of the day, for example, the night. And even if we look at like cultures around the world in this modern day as well, there's still many cultures that take a siesta or an afternoon nap because that's how we're wired. But modern like culture, society doesn't lend that self to it. Because of like work schedules. One of the big things as well, like diving into this, is well the education system as well as the work environment. If we look at like the different stages of sleep, so looking at babies to toddlers to children to teenagers to early adults to like elderly, we all have different like sleep schedules and patterns. We all know the teenager that likes to sleep in until, well, whatever time really, like 1-2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm wondering if we've got a chart on this on the presentations. I'm pretty sure we would have. We did have one previously, but it was showing like hours of sleep and sleep need. And although like the sleep need is the same, the actual time frame on which we sleep, the chronotype is actually like different from like stage of life to stage of life. So obviously like newborns need a significant amount of sleep, and they could sleep for like 20 hours a day. It's because they're at that stage of life and they're growing, and that's a huge need for it. And then looking at like later life, like around teenage years, we're looking at actually their sleep pattern shifting. So they're not lazy that they want to sleep into like that part of the day. They've just become more of like a morning lark or a night owl as such. They stay up later. They still need the same sleep need, but the actual period of time in which they sleep has shifted from early life to teenage life. And that's to meet the demands of where they are in that particular like stage of life. And here's the really bizarre thing with like the education system on this front as well. It's like we want our younger generations to perform cognitively as well as physically in the education system, but we get them up early when actually teens shouldn't be up at that stage of the day. And then we want them to perform maximally cognitively, but then they can't because actually they should still be laying in bed. In my eyes, we should center our education and our learning around actually when we sleep so we can be productive. And one of the big things is like for my kids, like noticing that they still nap in the day, but they're at school. So you want them to learn and max out, but then they're not allowed to sleep because of that particular one. It's the same for us in adult life and working. We're quite fortunate that we can work our own like schedules and be flexible and adaptable around that. And we certainly urge people to like nap if you do have the ability to. But here's the thing, like you already eat food, you schedule in time to eat, you already sleep at night, you schedule in time to work out. So scheduling naps should be part of that as well. When in actual fact, you should look at like dropping training in some aspects if you are feeling fatigued. Yeah, and actually focusing on what is restorative and what's going to allow you to recover and adapt from the stresses of the day in training. And that could be incorporating a nap in there at some point. But it's understanding like where you are at in terms of life, but then how much sleep you need and at what time of day you should be sleeping to maximize your performance gains. Also understanding that consistency of the sleep wake time on top of that, but then also like the chronotype of being, are you a night owl, are you a morning lark, meaning someone that stays up late and wakes up later, or are you somebody that goes to bed earlier and wakes up in the morning, or are you a blend of both? So there's lots of considerations to be taken into account, but often our environment and our working life can determine what we're doing, but that's not necessarily what we should be doing as human beings. Like if we remove all the constructs and you were able to operate more like a hunter and gatherer, like our human genetics should be expressed, then actually how would you operate if you didn't have all those constructs? And then it's working towards constructing that in the best possible way. Anything to add on that, Mitch? I think something to dive into is like, when's the best time of day to nap, when not to nap, how long to nap, depending on what you're trying to achieve through napping.
It depends on the individual themselves, and it depends on how much of the sleep cycle that you've missed as well. So if you say you haven't had as much sleep, you then look at, okay, like how much of a sleep cycle is missed. Now we normally have 6 or 7, I believe it's 6 or 7 sleep cycles an evening. So if say you've had 4.5 sleep cycles, you need like half a sleep cycle. So you may only need 40 minutes of a nap. Now, bearing in mind, you have to look at, one, what have you been doing throughout the day? Like if you've just eaten and then tried having a nap, are you going to feel better afterwards? And are you going to be able to like fall asleep straight away? Like people say taking 20 minutes is great. I've found either taking 45 minutes or 90 minutes is better, or even an hour, just because you're going to hit at least half a sleep cycle. So a sleep cycle is roughly 90 minutes of the evening. So if you're getting 40 minutes in a nap, you're going to potentially or more than likely hit that sleep cycle that's needed. Now, the best time to take a nap comes down to the individual themselves. I've found when my productivity drops and I'm fatigued mentally and physically, I'm like, okay, right, go take a nap, and I'll have a nap, I'll wake up, and then I'm like, I feel a lot more energized, and then I can actually extend my day. Now, I know a lot of people work from home, not work from home, work in an office, so it's difficult to get a nap in. Like if you are feeling tired, obviously go for a walk, leave your phone, leave your screens, go for a walk, and that should help you energize, get throughout the day. Come back if you're still feeling tired. So say average person gets back around 5, 6 o'clock. Have a 45-minute nap, go train, and then eat, or eat, leave it a little bit, and then go train. So then you're not eating close to when you go into bed. If you work from home and you can plan your own schedule, between 1 and 2 o'clock can be ideal, like depending on the work that you've done throughout the day as well. And depending on how tired you are, like if you are feeling absolutely shattered, then you can even schedule 2 in. You could schedule 1 in around 10:30, and then you could schedule another 1 in around 2:30, 3. And then your productivity will then change massively. So to like summarize on it, depending on how much sleep you've had, like if you've had 5 hours sleep, you're going to need about 2 naps. If you want that productivity there and you want that energy there, you're looking at 2 45-minute naps. if you had like 6 hours or 6.5 hours, you'll only need 45 minutes. You'll only need one. And if you've had, say, 7 hours sleep and you're still feeling tired, you can have 20 to 30 minutes. And that just may be the kick that you need to then be productive. Because if you miss a sleep cycle and it goes back to the consistency, going to bed and wake up times, you need to not basically get that sleep cycle back, but your body needs to go through that restorative stage again of the sleep that has been missed. So you want to be aiming as close as you can to the time that's been missed. I've tried 20-minute naps, they don't work, like personally, but I know people that do 20 minutes, they wake up feeling energized as anything. So it comes down to yourself, what works for you, when you can schedule it in, and if you need it as well, because sometimes you don't need it.
Yeah, some really, really great points. And it's interesting how my sleep compares to yours, and then also like the napping, because looking at like my naps, I go for one or two options depending on where I'm at, time availability, among some other factors. But if I shoot for like 20 minutes and below, then actually that's really, really good for like a cognitive boost. Sometimes that can actually help with recovery, and that can be really beneficial as well. But what I found is if I go over 20 minutes too much, then actually I feel really groggy, because looking at my charts there, if I'm going over 20 minutes, I then start to go into my deep sleep cycle. And if I get woken up in a deep sleep cycle, I am a grumpy for the rest of the day.
You're a grumpy dick any day.
yeah. So yeah, if I'm grumpy dick, I'm not getting enough of my deep sleep. So that's what I found, and it really, really affected me for the rest of my day. So it's like got to be 20 minutes and below, and that will give me a good boost. I'm being very disciplined with that. Whereas if I go over that 20 minutes, I need to be getting nearer that 90-minute mark, where actually I'm going through a full sleep cycle. Now, if you're somebody that feels like everything we're talking about is like not practical, unrealistic, you just can't achieve this due to your work schedule, lifestyle, what I would say is like you really need to look at like your lifestyle and the job that you work, because in the short term it's not so much of an issue, although the detrimental effects will crop their ugly heads up. But if you're doing this for months, years, and many years in that case, then like you will feel the brunt of it. You will have an impaired immune system. Your health will be feeling the brunt of this at some point. So if you're not able to nap and you're getting lousy sleep, that's okay. You need to look at how you can maximize your sleep. And if you can't do that, and your work and your lifestyle is determining how much sleep you're getting, like I urge you to really reevaluate what you're doing, because it will accelerate aging. It will make you ill, and will like increase like the probability of getting diseases as well. Right. So really addressing this, but not using napping as a way to compensate for poor sleep, looking at it as a way to increase or boost like your already good sleep in a way. And remembering we can be biphasic sleepers, and then tying that into young children, teenagers, early adult life, adults, elderly. They also suggest as well like that we had this like irregular as well as like biphasic sleep, so that like if we think about like ancestral primal human and like the bands or the tribes that we used to be in, like if you've got this irregular sleep pattern, or people sleeping at different times of day, different times of night, you've technically got someone always on watch, always on guard. So if there is predator danger, so it kind of makes like biological sense. But what doesn't make sense is our modern environment and actually the deprivation that we undergo because of our lifestyle and the choices that we make, and the things that we prioritize over something that is so significant and so relevant to our overall health. I really like urge you to like readdress this as well. A couple of other things on napping as well. Like you can do this from mid-morning onwards till about 4 p.m, but you don't really want to be like taking naps after sort of like 2 to 4 p.m, because that will have an effect on your your sleep in the later part of the day as well, and that could push you over to going to bed later, therefore impacting deep sleep as well. Things I've found useful for my naps when I take them is like listening to binaural beats. I'm just putting some headphones in and then having an alarm clock. There's some really good ones on YouTube actually that are 20 minutes, 90 minutes long that you can get into, and they're really, really good for enhancing getting into sleep, but then also that like feeling of productivity and energy that you're seeking from having a nap on top of that.
Yeah, it's not something that you can use to basically enhance performance. However, it's something that can improve your productivity and just give you that boost that you need sometimes. Like for yourself, you can have 20 minutes or less. I have 20 minutes or less. I'm fucking like, don't come near me. I want to be left alone. Whereas if I have like 45 minutes to an hour, that seems to be the spot where I'll hit it. And then I'll wake up, and then I'll move things around. But I do agree with looking at the lifestyle choices that you have for those watching this back that can't have naps, always struggling. Look back at what you're doing on the evening before you go to bed as well, because that's something we don't look at. And if you reflect on that and look at it and you pinpoint, okay, I'm doing this, let's change it. See how you feel the next day or over the next few days. But then again, don't expect a huge turnaround or a huge change within the space of a night, because it takes time for your body to adjust and adapt.
Yeah, 100%. Right. So yeah, really, really look into this, guys. It is massively important. I feel like there's so much more context we can put onto sleep, and we did do a podcast previously on sleep at the end of last year, which went over some other similar sort of things. But there's so much we can dive into. So if there's something from this conversation that you've gained value from, or you want us to dive a little bit deeper into, then you can ask, all right, leave that in like the comments, chat, or message us directly on social media, and we'll get back to you. But this is fundamental. Like if you're really, really serious about living a long, healthy, happier life, then you need to sleep. If you're serious about maximizing your adaptation from the training stimuluses that you undergo on a weekly, daily basis, then sleep is the most available thing that we have on hand. And often people will be looking at all like the fancy fashionable things that they can buy and incorporate in, but then if you're neglecting your sleep, you're shooting yourself in the foot significantly. All right, and there's so much that can be done to optimize it. So if you fall into the camp of I can't get more than 4, 5, 6 hours sleep, I would strongly argue that you can. It's looking at all the environmental factors that we've spoken about that would be influencing your ability to get the sleep that you want and need. But I hope this has highlighted the importance of sleep. Yeah, is there anything final you want to go over, Mitch, on this front?
Get your fucking sleep. Honestly, just get like sleep. You will feel the benefits. Like I know myself and Matt will talk a lot and we preach about a lot of the stuff, but we also implement it. It doesn't mean we get it right or we have it perfect as well with sleep. Like there are times where it's inconsistent, but if you aim for consistency, where say you have 6 good days out of 7, and you're like that repetitively over the months and upcoming years, 1, you're gonna look younger. 2, you're gonna feel better. 3, the knowledge and the productivity that you're gonna have, like your cognitive function, is just gonna go through the roof, and you're not gonna be a grumpy dick as well. So go to bed early. Like honestly, going to bed is the new party.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, gone are the days where I'm like, oh, like where can I be? What can I do? Where can I stay up late? It's like when can I get an early night and yeah, have a chilled evening.
It's peace and quiet.
Definitely. But it's looking at what you do in that evening time. So yeah, I think remember that. Look how you can ease out of the day to maximize the benefits of sleep, and look how you can like ease into the day. And some take home points that I think everyone should be doing is looking at like when you're going to bed, when you're falling asleep, when you need to be up, and then also like looking into the more like intrinsic details of those sleep stages, and you can get a lot of information. But yeah, we're on hand if you want to have a conversation and help us sort of break this down with you to maximize your performance. But yeah, it's a good conversation. You know where to find us if you need any support surrounding sleep or anything nutrition, physical training, related. Cool. I think we'll wrap that up. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we will be releasing another episode later this week. So have a good week, and catch you again soon.
See you later, everyone.
Thanks for listening. If you found value in today's podcast, then we'll greatly appreciate a rating and a review so we can help find more people like you. Also, sharing this episode on your social media channels will help us reach more people so that we can provide them with the same knowledge, race strategies, the tactics to allow us all to succeed in both life as well as competition. Also, if you'd like to dive deeper and learn more about how we can support you on your journey, then head over to Instagram or Facebook and send me a direct message. Alternatively, you can visit livingprimal.co.uk for more information about our services. Catch you next time.